Food is fuel. If somebody told you, look, you can put any liquid you want in your car, it'll run fine, you would laugh at them and think that's ridiculous. You know, you have to put a very specific fuel in a car engine. Well, why do we think that you can put anything in the body as long as you can shove it in your mouth hole? It's ridiculous.
Today, I have, in my opinion, one of the most qualified person about fasting in the world. And probably, in my opinion, the most qualified person in the world to talk about this. So I want to tell you that I did a 30-day fast with only water. I don't know if you saw it. I'm a YouTuber and I made a video, and the video has now 1 million views about this topic. And I experienced it myself, and I just wanted to ask a lot of questions. I want to get your take about this fasting thing. So talk first why you are doing it, and why I consider you the most qualified person on earth to talk about the business that you guys have and what you do.
We've been involved in supervising water-only fasts in patients since 1984. So for the last almost 40 years, we've had the opportunity to work with over 25,000 patients at the TrueNorth Health Center in Santa Rosa, California, where patients come in, they're under direct medical supervision. They stay with us at our 79-bed facility and undergo fasts that range from 5 and 40 days on water only. And then we feed them a whole plant food diet that's free of salt, oil, and sugar. So we have a whole plant food-based dietary regime, which we think is an important part not only of recovery from fasting, but also in sustaining long-term health.
So you have 79 beds there, and you're taking people, and you're doing fast from a week to 40 days. As I watched a lot of your podcasts to prepare for my water fast, I saw that most of the people that they come there, they have or health problem, or they're obese, or there is some problem with them that they want to fix. There is not like normal healthy humans trying it on average. Is this?
Well, actually, we have both. We have people that have diabetes, high blood pressure, autoimmune disease, and cancer. But we also have healthy people that want to stay healthy. And in fact, if you look at one of our most recent studies, it's on metabolically healthy people that are fasting. And it turns out the magnitude of the changes in cardiometabolic risk factors in healthy people is actually even greater than sick people. It may be that the people that get the most benefit of fasting are actually healthy people using fasting to stay healthy, to deal with problems before they become difficulties, to look at the actual causes of death rather than the leading causes of death. The leading causes of death are heart disease, cancer, and stroke, but the actual causes of death, the reason people get heart disease, cancer, and stroke, is the use of tobacco, alcohol, and eating an animal-rich diet, highly processed foods.
So you claim that the healthy people get greater benefits.
If you look at cardiometabolic risk factors, different biomarkers that we measure in fasting, as beneficial as this is in sick people, proportionally, some healthy people actually also get changes. Sometimes those changes on average are greater than the people even that are sick.
Okay. By the way, you have a company that they do this, and they are doing online consultation with people. And I had some online consultation with the people in your team. It was amazing. They took care of me. Amazing. So I recommend, if you guys in the future want to try the fast, to do a consultation with them, or even go to their offices. But the person that I talked to, they said that is most of the data that you guys have is on people that they had health problems, that is difficult for people to come there. Is rare for people to come there and be fully healthy. I don't know if
we have a lot of healthy people, but here's the problem. Like when we were enrolling patients in the study to test healthy people and fasting, most of the people that we found, even though they thought they were healthy, they weren't overweight or they didn't have high blood pressure, when we actually objectively looked at their health status, they weren't healthy. They were not metabolically healthy. They thought they were. But most people, only about 12% of the population is considered to be metabolically healthy. And I'm not sure that, that's even accurate, because in our experience, some of the few people we found that were actually healthy, ironically, happened to be staff working at the TrueNorth Health Center that eat a whole plant food diet all the time and exercise. There we were able to find some subjects, but subjects from the population as a whole are difficult. Now, the other problem is that most people, when they decide to do something really significant like fasting, are driven by pain, debility, and fear of death. They're not necessarily thinking preventatively because people haven't been publishing research on healthy people. It's not as exciting to say, well, I took a healthy person and I fasted them and now they're even more healthy. It's much more dramatic to say we have a person that has high blood pressure and diabetes, has a big tumor, and look at this, they got well. And that's who's basically driven to take time off and do interventive care. Now, that's going to change, though, because we're going to be enrolling patients in a very large-scale study where we track them for the rest of their life. Because what we're trying to do is not just extend life, but more importantly, eliminate debility, increase healthy life expectancy. Right now, the average person spends 9.46 years debilitated and almost 20 years in poor health. We want to make the last 20 years of someone's life the best 20 years instead of the worst 20 years. And it's the last 20 years where most money is spent with very little benefit in terms of not reducing all-cause mortality or extending functional health. We think that can change if people are willing to do really dangerous and radical things like eat well, exercise, go to bed on time, and consider fasting.
I have a question. What do you consider? You said 12% of the people are healthy. How do you define a healthy person? What's the metrics that we use?
So there's actually a whole literature on there in terms of what, if you look at cardiometabolic risk factors, cholesterol levels, lipid levels, CRP levels, markers of inflammation, weight and height, and percent body fat, and particularly how much of visceral fat people have. Some people are thin, but they're still over fat when it comes to visceral fat. Visceral fat is the type of fat that accumulates around the belly and around the organs and is thought to produce the inflammation that leads to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune disease. And so, that's an evolving science in terms of defining what's healthy, and it's particularly difficult in a situation where, over 2/3 of people are now overweight or obese. It's actually around 72% in the United States are overweight or obese. People that are overweight or obese are not going to be measuring as metabolically healthy. And so now, you're starting to get into a rarefied audience. And some of the people that are thin, they're not overweight or obese, but they're not metabolically healthy. They're just not overweight. Sometimes they're not overweight because they have absorptive problems and they're not able to actually absorb food. They can be sicker than the people that are overweight. So finding people that are actually healthy and defining that is actually kind of an area of interest. And it's one of the topics that we're pursuing in our current and ongoing research.
Okay, so can you explain in simple terms why fasting helps us humans?
Yeah. So the reason people are developing heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases is because they eat too much and they get fat and they get visceral fat. And visceral fat produces inflammatory products that cause these diseases. So it's not shocking that when you fast, you would lose fat. But what's interesting, and if you look at we have all of our studies published on our website, fasting.org, which is the Fasting Compendium website of our nonprofit research foundation. And one of the studies we did showed that not only was fat mobilized during fasting, but visceral fat was preferentially mobilized. And the ratio of visceral fat to fat was 3-to-1. What that means is if you take a person, let's say you take a person and fast them for 2 weeks, they'll lose somewhere around 20% of their body weight, but they'll lose in 55% or more of their visceral fat. And so there's a disproportionate preferential mobilization of this dangerous type of fat during fasting. Fasting reduces the excess sodium in a person's system, so it drops their blood volume and their blood pressure. So things start to heal. It'll reduce insulin resistance. So the diabetic patients will normalize their blood sugar levels. It'll be involved in detoxification. If you take a fat biopsy of a human, even a healthy human, you'll find hundreds of different chemicals, PCB, dioxin, pesticide residues, heavy metals, accumulating in the bodies of these individuals. During fasting, the body rapidly mobilizes and eliminates these materials. Sometimes fasting isn't very pleasant because of this rapid detoxification, but the net effect is people get well. And now we've got data showing not only do people get well during fasting, but when we follow them at 6 weeks and we follow them at a year, they're able to sustain their weight loss, their normal blood pressure, their drug-free state. So now we're showing at least highly motivated patients are able to sustain the diet and lifestyle changes. Fasting causes neuroadaptation, so good foods start to taste good. Fasting is like rebooting the hard drive on a computer. You know how you're using the computer, it becomes corrupted. You don't know, you turn it off, you turn it on. You don't know why, but now everything starts working again. Well, fasting is equivalent to that in humans. You shut everything down, including the gut microbiome. You get a big reduction in changes there. The normal healthy gut microbiome is thought to have 1,000 different strains of organisms, maybe 5 pounds, over 1 trillion creatures living and swimming and defecating inside you. And what those organisms poo inside you depends on what you feed them. So if you feed them a plant-based diet, you get 1,000 strains of diverse organisms protecting you from the ravages of the environment. You feed them a diet high in meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar, you have a completely different strain of organisms, and what they're pooing inside you is different. So, you can see how important that the role of the integration of fasting, diet, sleep, and exercise is altogether. Many of the changes that occur with exercise, for example, increased BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, also occur in fasting. BDNF is thought to minimize the damage, the oxidative damage that happens in the brain. So, for example, rats in cages, everything's the same, genetically bred rats, fed the same, but you give one rat an exercise wheel, those rats will exercise and do not get dementia. Whereas the rats that can't exercise get dementia. They realize why? Well, exercise increases BDNF, which protects the brain from the damages of oxidations from the diet. So why would exercise increase BDNF? And fasting also does the same thing. Well, if you think about it, both fasting and exercise have one thing in common. They eliminate the dietary excess that's the cause of the problem. Exercise helps with weight control. Fasting helps with weight control. So it's not surprising that when you look at the metabolic changes of improvement that occur with exercise, you'll find the same kind of changes improving with fasting. And that's actually been interesting research-wise, looking at those same markers and seeing how many times they correlate with each other.
So can we stop exercising and start fasting and it will be the same thing?
No, I think that some of the things are the same. That is like increasing BDNF, et cetera. But there's additional benefits to exercise and different things with fasting that are completely are on a different plane. For example, detoxification with fasting is intensely more effective than, say, it might be with exercise. But exercise is going to improve aerobic capacity. So you need both. That's the point. You can't just fast. You can't just eat well. You can't just exercise. You need to do all three. And in addition, you need to get enough sleep, because sleep's an important part of healing. It stimulates the anabolic cascade of hormones associated with health. So sleep deprivation can really pay a price. Poor dietary choices pay a huge price.
So another video that I did is no sleep for 5 days. So you don't recommend that?
I would not recommend that as a health-promoting habit. And in fact, if you go long enough without sleep, you will actually develop psychosis. It's an interesting phenomenon. So sleep, exercise, and the thing with exercise, too little is not good. Too much, can be damaging too. So, you want to be reasonable. Same thing with water. Water is really good, but if you drink too much water, you can flush out your electrolytes and get water toxicity.
Can you explain me what is a good exercise and not going to the other direction that is harmful?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's a few things with exercise. One, you have strength, flexibility, endurance. These are all important issues. So the type of activities you do would hopefully encourage you to build balance, strength, endurance, and flexibility. So I like things like walking, hiking, biking, swimming, that are whole body activities. If you do it properly, you can get significant benefit from resistance training, weight training, things of that nature. But again, any of these things done to excess can lead to overuse or injuries or a bit of setbacks. Sporting activities can be wonderful, but again, can be competitive athletics can be a risk factor too. So you want to work within your capacity and training and
so basically exercising 4, 5, 6 days a week for 1 hour. If you do all this stuff that you said, it will not harm you. This is not.
Well, I think it's an important thing. Regular, consistent, hopefully a variety of exercise can not only not harm you, but may be a critical component of maintaining improved sleep quality, for example. improve weight control, stress dissipation effects, strength, flexibility, endurance, balance. These are all critical issues at maintaining health into advancing age. People that exercise vigorously and regularly tend to live longer and better than people that sit on the couch and watch other people exercise. In the United States, in particular, many men have stopped exercising. They hire other people to do it for them. They call it the NFL. And so they sit on an overstuffed chair or couch and watch other people exercise and engage in mock warfare where they drink high-caloric beverages and pretend to be part of the winning team.
Okay, so I think it's kind of disgusting if you see the society now of how much they eat food. They wake up, they eat breakfast, they eat, especially in the United States, because I'm from Europe, I see the United States is 3 times worse than Europe. They wake up, eat breakfast, then they eat in the middle, a snack, a bar. They eat they eat like 10 times a day, and before they sleep, they get something to eat. This is I think it got crazy. Can you talk?
Well, in the worldwide competition to see who's going to be the fattest and sickest, U.S. is number one. We're number one. Now, it's true that Europe is rapidly catching up, but there are some countries like in Asia where only have 3% obesity. In this competition, it's like they're not even trying.
It's interesting to compare all these countries and see what they are doing differently. But tell me, what do you think is the optimal diet for a normal person? I mean, in the not what to eat, but how often to eat.
Well, I think that what we recommend is that people eat within an 8-hour feeding window and fast for 16 hours every day. That means that we recommend not eating 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep at night, delaying breakfast so you do some exercise in the morning, and that'll give you an 8-hour window. In that 8-hour window, how often you eat would depend on what your caloric density requirements are. Some people need 3,000 calories a day, some people need 1,500 calories, depending on their age, their work level, etc. And so, but within that 8-hour window, whether you have 2 or 3 meals, in other words, how many times you fill up that feeding bag will depend on how much calories is needed. But by limiting your feeding window to an 8-hour window, you're less likely to be overeating, eating before you go to sleep, which disrupts sleep quality, increases fat absorption. And so that pattern works. And more importantly is what you eat. We recommend you eat only whole plant foods that eliminate SOS, salt, oil, and sugar. Salt, oil, and sugar are not food. They're hyperconcentrated food byproducts. They're additive food, stimulate dopamine production in your brain to fool your brain into overeating. If you get people to eat a whole plant food diet, the tendency to overeat is dramatically reduced. And as a consequence, obesity tends to be dramatically reduced. So you're eating a diet that's high in nutrition density, but low in caloric density. What people do in the United States is often just the opposite. They're eating very high caloric density, low nutrition or no nutrition foods, and they're on a complete feeding frenzy as if the greatest goal in life is to see how fat and sick you can get as quickly as possible.
It's kind of funny actually to watch. Like people, it's the funniest thing. Oh my God, I didn't eat breakfast. I'm starving. This is a phrase that I hear so much in the United States, and it's the funniest thing in the world.
People believe that if you get on a plane in New York and you fly on that plane all the way to California, you will starve to death over Colorado unless you eat those pretzels or those peanuts. They think the peanuts save their life.
Yes, that's true. So I'm curious to see. So, for example, me, I started adopting only eating once per day, maybe in 1.5 hour window. So do you think going more and only plant-based food? I'm vegetarian, all this stuff. Do you think finding the thing for yourself is the right thing, or maybe you don't know what's the right thing for yourself and like?
Well, the one way you can, here's the thing. If you're eating fruits and vegetables, starchy vegetables, these foods have between 100 and 500 calories a pound. If you fill up the stomach, for example, of a human being with potato, you get around 500 to 700 calories. So how many times you eat a day will depend on how many calories you need in order to sustain your optimum weight, not necessarily your current weight, but your optimum weight. Typical person on average around 2,000 calories. That's why on average people are going to fill up their feeding bag about 3 times a day. So you can eat less frequently, but you'll need higher density foods. Since we're using low density foods, we tend to want to see the people eating 2 or 3 times a day and within an 8-hour window though. So, for example, you might get up, you might have some fresh fruit in the morning with greens. You may have salad, steamed vegetables, potatoes, rice, and beans, whatever it is your diet's going to be made of. But it's going to be hopefully free of meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, sugar. What we tell people is basically anything, any of these hyper-concentrated foods, we just want to eliminate them and replace them with larger volumes of low-density, high-nutrition whole plant foods. What's going to happen is a diet that's around 10% of calories from protein, 15 to 18% of calories from fat, with the balance coming from whole plant carbohydrates.
So it's about what to eat and completely eliminate, you said, all these dairy products, all these, like not even have an egg, not even have...
Absolutely. We recommend a completely whole plant food SOS-free diet. So you have fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, no meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar. Basically, anything you really, really want, you can't have. You get nothing.
My favorite food is broccoli, so I can have
You're going to be fine. If you ate nothing but brown rice and broccoli, it'd be a boring diet, but you got 2,000 calories of that a day. So, 6 cups of rice, 9 cups of broccoli. You'd get all the vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, carbohydrates you need. The only thing you wouldn't get is B12 because you wouldn't be getting that fecal contamination of animal-based products. And so you would have to supplement B12. We do recommend that's the nutrient that people do supplement is vitamin B12.
Okay, so I want to jump. We can talk later about how we live longer and how does this helps our life live longer years. But I want to dive a bit in the nitty-gritty stuff that I discovered, and I want to get your take with my water-only fast. First of all, it sucks. It's very difficult after 4 or 5 days. The first 5-7 days, I consider them to be easy because you still have it. But then you have so much low energy. I was like, I started understanding why the grandpas are complaining. I was complaining. I'm not a complaining person. I was complaining about everything. I don't have energy, or bring me food, or do that. So it was I considered while I was doing the fasting to be kind of a different person. And what do you think about
Well,
this?
you are a different person when you're fasting because your brain changes from burning your normal fuel, glucose, to burning beta-hydroxybutyric acid, which is essentially ketones or a breakdown of fat. The reason humans can fast more than a week is because we're able to change our brain fuel, which is the main burner of glucose, to burning fat. If it wasn't for that, we could only go about a week. We can go, an average 70 kilogram male can fast up to 70 days because they are able to conserve their proteins by burning fat instead of sugar. The problem is if you're too active in fasting, when you're fasting, if you don't lead in properly, if you don't fast properly, what happens is
you can't be too active. You can't be too active while you are doing a 30 days fast.
People are too active when they're fasting, and there's a consequence. They get dehydrated, and they also get into a problem of gluconeogenesis. The more active you are with your brain or your muscles, what happens is instead of burning fat, you're now breaking down muscle protein in order to provide the necessary additional energy that's being demanded by the brain and the muscle.
Can you explain me what active means? Is it working on your laptop? Is it just standing?
The brain is your biggest burner of glucose, so too much work on the computer, too much physical activity will cause depletion. In reality, for most patients, and we've done this 25,000 times, first couple of days of fasting, you're still on glycogen, but you're, depending how toxic you are, you may have some symptoms. Your mouth can coat up and taste like something crawls in there and dies. You can have skin rashes, elimination, low back pain, headache, irritability. Those symptoms tend to go away. And then metabolic rate slows down. If people don't slow down along with their metabolic rate, they'll develop profound fatigue or they'll develop dehydration. And then once you get into the fast, though, typically people stabilize pretty well until the very end of fasting when depletion occurs and you start converting, potentially more protein and breaking down lean tissue. If fasting is done properly, though, the majority of calories are being derived from fat, nutrient, and lean tissue is reserved. In a study that we did, we actually used DEXA scanners to look at body composition changes in fasting. What we found was that, people lose a bunch of weight at fasting, they regain when they come off, but the weight they regain when they come off the fast is water, protein, fiber, and glycogen, not fat. Fat continues to come down, particularly visceral fat. And at the end of 6 weeks, these patients had a higher lean mass than they did when they started fasting, lower fat and dramatically lower visceral fat, and they had replenished their glycogen, fiber, and other essential nutrients. So the fact is that, yes, you lose weight in fasting, you regain weight when you come off. What you're regaining when you come off is the 2 pounds of glycogen in your muscles, the fiber, the water. And if you do this properly, you can transform your body composition, detoxify the body, reduce insulin resistance, and increase the factors that will promote longevity, both in terms of quality of life and quantity of life.
So, 30 days fast, I lost 15 kilos.
32 pounds, which is about right. Average weight loss is about a pound a day.
And it was the first week I lost so much more, and then it was going down. In the first week, you dehydrated. You lost some of the fluid that you were holding on to, and then metabolic rate slows, and your rate of weight loss reduces. In fact, by the end of the third week, you were noticing that it was dropping down even lower. You were losing weight at a lower and lower rate. And then when you came off the fast, you regained probably a significant portion of weight. As the fluid, the glycogen, the fiber, and the protein were replenished. And hopefully, because you ate well, hopefully you kept the visceral fat off. I'm curious so I put, but a lot of the weight, I didn't put it, I put it on my belly, a lot of the weight. Is this often what is happening?
When you say the weight you regained?
Yes, after the fast.
Yeah, you have to be careful. When we bring people off fast, we have a very specific protocol we follow for half the length of the fast. So if you have a 30-day fast, there's 15 days of controlled refeeding. There'd be 2 days, 600 calories of fresh fruit and vegetable juices, 2 days of fresh raw fruits and vegetables. Then we introduce steamed vegetables. Then by the end of 15 days, you're back on a whole plant food SOS-free diet. And if you do that properly, the only weight you'll be regaining is water, fiber, glycogen, and protein. You won't be gaining any fat back, particularly not visceral fat on your belly. What people do in reality, though, is they tend, especially if they're not in a controlled setting, they tend to refeed a little bit too rapidly. And so what happens is
you are so hungry.
You shouldn't really be hungry if we do it right, though. What happens is, blood sugars go up, insulin comes in, drives the sugar levels down. Your brain thinks you're starving. You've gone through weight loss. So this is one of the reasons we recommend fasting be done in a controlled setting with controlled refeeding, because it's very difficult. When you've not eaten for 30 days and then you have access to food, it's hard to control the way that's done.
Yes, I agree with that. That's a big statement. I consider I have discipline in work-class discipline. And when I stopped the fast, I couldn't control myself to not eat. So right. it was.
And that's why we recommend, especially long-term fasting, be done in a controlled setting in an environment that promotes it. It's serious business. And in fact, if you're very careless and you too rapidly refeed, you can get into what's called refeeding syndrome, which can throw off your electrolytes and ultimately can even kill you. So it's a serious business, especially these long-term fasts. So the results can be tremendous, but there's also risks if it's not done properly.
So 30-day fast, I pooped on day 3, and in the whole 30 days, I didn't poop. Is this normal?
Yeah, you won't have, remember, defecation is made up of mostly bacteria and fiber and a little bit of material from the liver. So there's not going to be any input into the colon. The colon is outside your body. When you swallow something, it's not in your body. It's going in a tunnel through your body. You shove it in one hole, and then eventually you push it out the other hole. Well, when you stop shoving stuff in one hole, there's nothing to come out the other hole. So, of course, when you're fasting, your bowel activity is going to reduce down dramatically. And then when you start feeding and you start shoving stuff in one hole, once it gets through the system, it'll start coming out the other hole again. And so, it's only what's absorbed through the intestinal mucosa that gets into your body. That's why most detoxification and fasting isn't nothing to do with the stools. It has to do with your urine, because the urine is the blood that's been processed by your kidneys. That's where the metabolic products come out. That's why it's so important to include adequate water when you're fasting. This practice of dry fasting is not physiologically sound, in my opinion. And that's why you're hearing about these people dying from it, because you'll go into kidney failure if you don't have solute in order to put the toxins that you're mobilizing in fasting. That's why we monitor specific gravity in urine to make sure a person's getting enough, but not too much water. Too much water will flush out your sodium and electrolytes, cause water toxicity. Too little causes dehydration and death. So we kind of keep people in that balance. And generally, that's at least 40 ounces of water a day.
It's very difficult to drink water during the water fast. You are disgust of water by the end of the...
Well, I think that's a sign, though, of dehydration that happens when people are too active in fasting. We don't have as much problems with people getting water in when they're resting properly and they're doing things right. Now, the other thing you can do is sometimes people have nausea because their liver's dumping bile, that yellow-green pigment that's associated with some patients. And for those, we'll take distilled water and we'll carbonate it. So no sodium or other things, but and that tends to help with the nausea. Or sometimes it gets so bad you have to actually break the fast for a couple of days, put them on juices and broth, rehydrate them, and then you can go back to the water fasting successfully. And that can be an adaptation. So a lot of the problems that people have in fasting are transient. Yeah, there can be early phase, the first few days, the foul taste and some of that stuff, but that'll usually clear. And then they may get, depending on what their health condition is, they may have joint swelling, or they may have skin rashes or detox symptoms. They may have emotional volatility, sleep disruption. Sounds great, doesn't it? For a person that hasn't fasted and you start describing what happens fasting, it's like, doesn't sound very pleasant. But the net effect is good enough that even if people go through the sucky part of fasting, they're happy enough with the end result that, we're still around doing this.
I consider probably the greatest experience that I ever had in my life, because it was so different than normal life. I got to experience myself in a different way. I got to understand and a lot of interesting things. One night I was kind of not hallucinating. It was so different experience. It was difficult, but it's like every difficult thing you do is you come out the other way and you're proud. You have a different understanding of things.
Well, isn't it interesting that Jews and the Jains and the Hindus and the Muslims and the Christians, these people don't agree on everything, but they do agree on fasting. Fasting has a tradition in every major religion, and it's because it changes the way you feel about yourself and the world around you. It's not just David, Michael, Jesus, Moses that fasted. Certainly hundreds of our patients, yourself included, have experienced, long-term water-only fasting. It's a very intense process. We drive it based on physical health, improvement, but moral, ethical, spiritual, there's all kinds of reasons people fast. In fact, most of the people in the world that have done fasting were not doing it primarily to drive health. They were doing it for more of the emotional and spiritual side of the picture. But we have found that it's a consistent, reliable way of helping the body do what it does best, and that's heal itself when you get out of the way.
So you are talking a lot about the healing thing, but I'm saying that it has itself intrinsically the experience. It's so beautiful. So yes, even just for the challenge of it, just for the experience, is worth it. Without the health thing, it's like why people go to Navy SEALs. Okay, it's not the same way.
But I still think if people do it for whatever their motivation, it's good to do it. Here's the important things about fasting. Number one, make sure you're a good candidate for fasting. Not everybody is a good candidate for fasting. Many conditions contraindicate fasting, and particularly for people that are under medical treatment or on medications. You do not fast on medications, and you have to be careful about withdrawal of medications so that it be done appropriately. Certainly, medications like cardiac stabilizing medications, anticoagulants, steroid medications, you don't just stop those, because a sudden withdrawal of those can result in very serious problems. You have to wean them off, and you have to deal with the reasons why you're on them. So make sure the person's a good candidate. Number two, you need to establish baseline data. So get a physical exam and some baseline lab done by a physician so you can tell the difference later between a good thing and a bad thing that can develop in fasting. We call these fasting healing crises. Number three, rest when you're fasting. So you take it easy. So it doesn't mean you lay in bed and don't move. I mean, you definitely don't want to get the pathology of bed rest and pneumonia from laying around too much, but you want to be, you're not driving a car and risking your life and everybody else around you. You're not doing vigorous work. You're doing hopefully, limited amounts of pleasant activities. You're not doing vigorous physical activity. If you exercise more in fasting, you'll lose more weight, but it won't be fat, it'll be muscle. You'll just be depleting your lean tissues. And then number 4, you must terminate the fast appropriate. We recommend a day of controlled feeding for every week of fasting. So a day of juice, a day of raw food, a day of raw food and cooked foods for every week of fasting. So a 20-day fast will take you 10 days of controlled progressive refeeding before you're back to unrestricted eating. And then after fasting, adopt a whole plant food SOS-free diet, sleep, and exercise. If you do that, you win. You will get healthy. You will be able to have the benefits of fasting without, damaging yourself.
I think I lost muscle on the way of the 30-day fast. So you are supposed to lose a lot.
You would have
muscle?
lost about 4% of your lean tissue, which should be replenished by 6 weeks of recovery. In other words, by 6 weeks after fasting, you should have actually more percentage of your body lean tissue than it was when you started. If you lost more muscle, it may be because you were a little bit too active during fasting. That can be a problem, especially when people are not in a controlled environment. They're used to so much activity that they don't really understand how important it is to really turn everything down when they're fasting.
Another thing that I noticed, probably maybe the worst feeling about the fasting is I thought that the house smelled bad, but my breath or something smelled bad.
Yeah.
On me.
What smelled bad was you. You smelled bad because a lot of the stuff that was inside your cells that really shouldn't have been there is being mobilized and eliminated. And so, and particularly, breath, mucus discharge, body odor itself can be very intense. Sometimes it's hard to even be in the room with yourself, let alone with other people. But again, that clears up as your internal mechanisms clear up. It's just one of the many signs of detoxification that occurs in fasting.
Another thing that I notice is when I refeed myself after 30 days with a celery juice, immediately after 30 minutes, it was like a miracle. Like I went to poop. It's like 30 days I didn't poop at all. And in 30 minutes or probably 20 minutes after I drank the celery juice, I went to the toilet. Is
sometimes a little bit of material will accumulate during the fast. There's not much, not enough to trigger bowel movements, particularly the autonomic nervous system is affected by fasting. As soon as you start rehydrating, it stimulates some peristalsis, and then you move the material out. And within a few days, you are back to having normal bowel function. You also noticed how concentrated your urine got early in fasting, very concentrated. Again, because you were a little bit dehydrated, because your body's rapidly detoxifying, you get this tremendous amount of elimination that goes on in the urine, which is why, we need to monitor kidney function, make sure people have an adequate level of kidney function to handle the vigors of fasting. Many people that have been on medications have really damaged the organs. A lot of these new diabetes drugs damage the kidneys. And so it's harder for people to fast because it's hard for them to maintain electrolyte balance because they've been taking these toxic drugs to try to control their symptoms.
Okay, another thing that I noticed that this is probably, I don't know if I did in the right way or the wrong way, but I think my metabolism after I did it, it kind of changed. For example, I'm not sure, maybe I'm accumulating easier weight than I was doing before.
Well, what happens is metabolic rate slows during fasting, but by the time you've been feeding after fasting, it's going to be the same as it was before. There's no permanent change in metabolic function. But what does happen is your absorption improves, your digestion improves, you're able to make better use of food, especially if you develop new habits like chewing your food up instead of swallowing it whole. And as a consequence, you won't need as many calories in order to be able to rebuild strength and capacity. But you should be gaining lean tissue, not fat, if you're eating properly. If you're eating a whole plant food SOS-free diet, our experience is that the lean tissue by the end of 6 weeks is higher than it was at baseline, that what continues to go down is fat and visceral fat.
So you are saying that I might need a little bit less food after the thing.
It's possible you'll be able to maintain your weight with a slightly lower caloric density.
And because I was eating the same, maybe that's why I saw that I accumulate easier weight. That's
all I can tell you is, we did really detailed analysis on patients in a controlled setting. And the data is, if you go to our study, you can actually see the data. It's pretty clear what happens when it's done according to this protocol. Also, perception can be off sometimes too, because you're going through a
Yes.
whole body transformation, and you become aware of things you may not have been there. You may not have been aware were there. For example, a tumor. Somebody feels a tumor, right? They go on a fast. They lose a bunch of weight. Well, when they lose a lot of fat, they can actually feel the tumor more than they would have before. So when we go and look at the scan, it turns out the tumor is reduced by 50%, but they're thinking it got bigger. Well, the tumor didn't get bigger. Their just capacity to feel it is better because you got rid of a whole layer of fat that was covering it up. Sometimes people feel tumors they didn't have before. Well, they didn't get a tumor. What happened is they got rid of a layer of fat that now allows them to actually feel it. And we can, when we look at scans where it's more objective, it's pretty obvious what's going on.
Very beautiful. Very, very beautiful. Another thing that it was like a miracle I was, let's say, I was taking 5 hours to digest food and poop, but now after the thing, it's all the process happening in 2 hours. I'm able to digest food faster. I don't know, maybe if I'm right or wrong. Is this something?
Well, what you may be digesting a little bit faster, but more likely what's happening is your autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that might have been exhausted before, are now toned back up. So everything's starting to work properly. And also you're eating more fruits and vegetables and other higher fiber foods now, because a lot of times after fasting, good foods start to taste good. People will eat more of those. And so you'll get a little bit more activity. It also may be that before things were suppressed, not just because of diet, but you may have been exhausted. And so, if your autonomic nervous system that controls peristalsis is now rejuvenated, you may find that everything starts to work better. Not just bowel activity, but all of your apparatus tend to restore function, and that's one of the great things with fasting. For example, some guys will be waking up 5 or 6 times a night to pee because they have prostate hypertrophy. After fasting, they're not waking up anymore because the benign prostatic hypertrophy goes down. Women are having dysmenorrhea, menorrhagia, fibrocystic breast disease, all kinds of problems because their estradiol isn't being converted to estriol. After fasting, the gut microbiome that handle that conversion are replenished, and now their fibroids go away, their fibrocystic breast disease, they stop having the heavy cycles, the polycystic ovarian syndrome is resolved. All these seemingly unrelated problems tend to be recovering and restoring, and a lot of it's because of detoxification or because the gut microbiome is improved. It's because people got a rest. It's because the improved dietary changes afterwards, and like you said, the emotional, mental, spiritual, that may be affected too. Even though we don't focus on that, that's kind of hard to do research on and study. But the reality is people have a profound experience fasting. It changes who they are. Even if we're not, we don't say anything about any of that. That's not, we don't make that a part of the protocol. But, it's very common for people to have these experiences where, they have these epiphany experiences, even though, just as a natural consequence of fasting.
One of the greatest things I think as well in these realms that you are talking about is that you really understand that food gives you energy. And when you see the word and food in a different way after you come from this, it's like you see food as just energy, nutrients. So you don't see food as a habit. You don't see, so it's
food is fuel. Yes. And you either put clean burning fuel in your body or you put crap in. And when you put crap in, all of your systems have to deal with it. If somebody told you, look, you can put any liquid you want in your car, it'll run fine. Just put it, as long as it fits in the gas tank, it's fine. You would laugh at them and think that's ridiculous. You have to put a very specific fuel in a car engine. And if you put lousy fuel in, it clogs up the carburetor and everything gets to be a mess. Well, why do we think that you can put anything in the body as long as you can shove it in your mouth hole? It's ridiculous. There's very specific things that you're designed to burn. Whole plant foods, fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. You're not designed to efficiently process a lot of the highly processed foods that make up 93% of the calories that people in industrialized countries eat.
So 30 days. I did 30 days. How I came, so what this will have effect in my life. I'm going to live longer. That'll
depend on how you eat and live in the next decades. How long you live is largely determined by genetics and luck. The maximum lifespan is pretty much baked in. How well you live is determined by diet and lifestyle factors, including fasting. So if you want to live a long and healthy life and spend the last 20 of your years of your life healthy and fit, adopt a whole plant food, SOS-free diet, exercise, sleep, and do periodic fasting, 16 hours every day, and maybe occasionally you do a longer fast. I don't know that people need to do 30-day fasts on a regular basis. That's a very vigorous process. But certainly we recommend that people within their capacities fast that week or two on a periodic basis as a preventative measure. But the most important thing, diet, sleep, exercise. That's what's going to determine, in my opinion, how well you live over the long run.
Okay, so you cannot extend life with fasting, but
if you think about it, the rat studies, let's look at the rat studies. If you take rats, they live a certain amount of time. You do periodic fasting, you double their lifespan. You're not really doubling their lifespan. What it is rats have a maximum lifespan. And when you feed them a highly processed diet, you cut it in half. So you're just getting them back to the normal life. You think about this. There's been 105 billion humans born on the planet, modern humans. There's about 8 billion alive today. Okay, there's only been 5 individuals that have been well documented to live past 117. And one of those probably adopted the identity of their grandparents to avoid the subscription into the military. So at least 4, maybe 5. That means your chances of living past 117 are about 1 in 20 billion. Not really good. So the question isn't how long you're going to live. You're going to live less than 117 years. The question is, how well are you going to live in the years that you're alive? Are you going to live fully functional, go to sleep one night and not wake up and have a good death? Or are you going to find yourself unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed, waiting for people to change your diapers for 20 years because you ate a greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh diet and stroked out in your 60s instead of living fully functional until your 80s or 90s or longer?
Wow, the way you said that sounded a bit angry. So
I had a patient, I said, listen, you should adopt a good diet. You don't want to get older and have your kids having to change your diapers. And he said, hey, I had to change their diapers. Why shouldn't they have to change mine?
So I read a book about extending lifespan. I think it was David Sinclair. I don't know if you are familiar with his work. And one of the things that he's talking, basically the moral story of the book is what you said, exercise and sleep, but also his majority is like, don't eat a lot of food. If you eat once a day, these are the people that documented that they live longer.
If you eat once a day, though, what that implies is you're eating more highly concentrated foods, because you can't eat once a day if you're just eating vegetables and fruits and simple foods, because the caloric density is too low, because you can only eat so much volume. So the point is, if you're eating more concentrated volume, eating less is good. Overeating is bad, is what we should see. So whatever strategy you use to prevent overeating is going to help you live longer and better. I wouldn't recommend eating once a day, though, because once you're at optimum weight. If you're at optimum weight and you try to eat once a day, unless you're eating a higher proportion of concentrated foods, it's going to be difficult to get enough to sustain optimum weight. So whatever strategy keeps you at optimum weight is likely to be a strategy that's going to be beneficial over the long run.
Do you have an explanation on why we feel more alert and we can do a lot of, let's say, high intellectual thinking when we are hungry?
Yeah, it's interesting because I have patients that every year come in and fast just because one of them is a screenwriter and he does his best work fasting in the fasting state. I wish he lived healthier during the rest of the year, but he does great when he's fasting. So he'll come in, he'll fast until he finishes his screenplay. And that for him, it's great. And I think part of it is probably a survival mechanism. When you're fasting, it's usually because spring came late, there's nothing to eat. And so you're really on high alert, which is everything's accentuated. Your smell is more, your vision, your hearing, everything is accentuated during fasting. I'm sure you noticed that. And I think it's probably an adaptive mechanism. So you go get something to eat because it's not natural to go for long periods of time without eating if you have a choice. People don't do that voluntarily. They do it by force. And so I'm sure that there's an adaptive mechanism built in there. And it is true, though, people's senses are greatly accentuated during fasting, including their cognitive senses and their capacity to think. And maybe that's why they come to have such an epiphany experience.
Yes, it's brilliant. For example, I cannot work and have a full stomach. It's like I'm double efficient when I have empty stomach. So I'm trying to eat later in the day, maybe for dinner, 6, 7 p.m. for me to be able to enjoy a productive day and then have food and destroy productivity.
Yeah. What I would recommend, though, is stop eating 3 to 4 hours before you go to sleep. Be better to have a 6 o'clock meal and have enough time, and then maybe you'll be getting up and you can be productive in the morning. So there should be plenty of hours during the day to be highly productive.
Yes. So another thing that I was curious about that I heard you talk before is like, is this a cancer treatment?
Well, we've published one case in the British Medical Journal 9 years ago. And this was a 42-year-old woman with follicular lymphoma that had been well documented, had been tracked for a couple of years. They had recommended chemotherapy. Instead, she came in and fasted for 21 days. During that fast, her tumors disappeared. We followed her up with at a year with whole body CT, continued to show significant improvement. We published that paper in the British Medical Journal. We did a 3-year follow-up. By 3 years, she was completely cancer-free. And now, last week, we had her in the center. She is now 9 years. Did the CT imaging. She's completely cancer-free. Now, since then, we've been tracking a significant number, about 24 patients with lymphoma. Some of them, one gentleman, in fact, he's at the center right now. He did a 40-day fast. It was stage 4 follicular lymphoma, did well on CT follow-up. This is 2 years later, has continued to do well. We just did another 40-day fast, and we're hoping that we'll be able to get long-term results in him as well. We have a number of others that we're waiting for long-term data on so we can publish a cohort and eventually do a clinical trial. So at least in the case of lymphoma cancer, that apparently does respond, at least for some patients, to fasting. And it seems to be sustainable if they're willing to adopt a whole plant food diet after the fasting.
So what do you think is happening in the body, let's say, to the tumor?
In 2016, Yoshinori Ishimi got the Nobel Prize for Medicine talking about his work with autophagy. So autophagy is how the body eats up cancer cells. Well, it turns out in fasting, at least based on animal studies, autophagy is profoundly enhanced during fasting. So the thought is that the body goes in there and enhances the mechanisms by which it gets rid of these cancerous cells. And actually, there's a lot of research done on fasting in rats and rodents and other things, dramatically improving cancer survival, including Walter Longo published a paper in 2015 in Journal of Metabolism, where they took 30 rats with cancer and the same 30 rats with genetically induced cancer. And the 30 rats with cancer, when they gave them enough chemotherapy, all the rats died from the chemotherapy. But the 30 rats with the same cancer and the same chemotherapy that were fasted before and after treatment all survived and dramatically enhanced cancer-free survival. And so what they learned was that there's something called differential stress sensitivity and differential stress adaptation. Cancer cells don't do well in a ketogenic environment, in a high-fat environment, because they have high metabolic needs. They need that glucose. And human cells do adapt to a ketogenic environment because fasting is a biological adaptation. We're designed to be able to fast. And so in a ketogenic environment, the cancer cells don't compete as well, and the immune system is able to have a better chance to attack the cancer. And more importantly, chemotherapy damages cells, but fasting has a tendency to protect the cells from the damage, and it makes the cancer cells more vulnerable to the chemotherapy. So the conclusion was that the fasting dramatically enhanced the effectiveness of chemotherapy, improving survival. And once that happened, the pharmaceutical industry said, oh, that's interesting. Fasting makes the drugs work better. Why don't we come up with fasting mimicking drugs? And that's exactly what they're doing now, trying to come up with drugs that do what fasting does without that nasty fasting that you went through, and in a form that they can sell. So, that's always a nice idea too.
So, do you think it's going if they come up with this, it will work? It will have the same effect?
No, I think it'll be a complete and dismal failure because health results from healthful living, not from pills and potions and powders. But it doesn't matter whether it works or not. As long as they can do it without killing you immediately, they'll still be able to sell it.
So, as I understand, you hate all these pharmaceutical companies.
Well, I don't hate the companies. They're just trying to give people what they want as a way to, to deal with the consequences of the pleasure trap without actually changing their diet and lifestyle. What I think people want is one thing. What they need is a way to escape the pleasure trap. And that's why we wrote the book, The Pleasure Trap, Mastering the Hidden Force that Undermines Health and Happiness. And it's a disturbing book that doesn't tell you what you want to hear, but tells you what you need to know to get and stay healthy. So if you want to understand why people do what they do, read The Pleasure Trap, and you'll understand why doing a health-promoting diet and lifestyle in a world designed to make you fat and sick is difficult. It's probably the most difficult thing people will ever do in their life. The question is it worth it? And if your goal is to live a long and healthy life and have a good life and a good death, then I think it's going to be well worth it for people.
So another thing, you agree with all this supplement stuff, helping whatever the body needs to have supplements in a day?
I completely disagree with supplementation as a general rule. I did acknowledge that vitamin B12 needs to be supplemented. There are other nutrients that occasionally, depending on a person's problems, might need consideration. Vitamin D, for example, people that don't get out in the sun and aren't able to form enough vitamin D, the answer is get out in the sun more. But if you can't do that, you live in a place where you don't get exposure, supplementation may be necessary. But in my opinion, the use of supplementation often causes its own problems, and sometimes more problems than it solves. That's particularly true with things like vitamin A, for example, where when they've tried to use that as a cancer treatment, more people died with cancer than without it because of the negative effects. Fat-soluble vitamins, even vitamin D, when it's too much, can cause serious problems. Iron in males, serious problems for heart disease, which is why, people thinking they're protecting themselves by taking a multiple may actually be doing more damage than harm. So I think supplementation, like pharmaceuticals in general, need to be used intelligently, and we shouldn't let our arrogance exceed our ignorance. And most of this is about attempts to try to figure out how to get healthy, but without having to live healthy. And so I think that you can't replace healthy diet, for example, with pills and potions. And you can't replace healthy living with, fasting mimicking drugs and all kinds of convoluted treatment regimes. What you have to do is actually pay the price. And that's healthy living. Healthy living involves diet, sleep, and exercise.
So as I understand, you are saying that if you are taking supplements, if you are taking a drug or whatever, it can have maybe a positive thing in the beginning, but when you see things from above, it might damage or maybe it will let yourself not produce this thing or that you need to produce
Think about vitamin C as an example, a relatively benign nutrient. When you give pregnant women vitamin C and their babies are born, they can have what's called rebound scurvy. This is because it induces vitamin C oxidase to break down vitamin C. I'm just saying there's a lot of, it's on the surface, it's very logical. Oh, we want to get all the nutrients and all that. And people are thinking everything's from dietary deficiency. So if you spend enough money on pills and potions, you'll be healthy. The problem is people are not dying from deficiency in industrialized societies. They're dying from dietary excess. That's why diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting make more sense. It's getting rid of the excess, not pretending that everything's going to be solved by deficiency correction that's going to yield the best results. Now, having said that, when you're on a lousy diet, you may have some deficiency issues, but the answer isn't taking a pill. It's changing your diet and lifestyle to correct the deficiency. And if you read Dr. Campbell's excellent book, Whole, you'll see a tremendously strong argument that taking vitamin pills is not the same thing as eating nutrients from food, that there's a great potentiating effect in the form of food, that the same 50 milligrams of vitamin C in food can have many, many times the clinical effectiveness as taking something in a pill and without the negative effects that the pills might have. So I'm just expressing extreme caution when it comes to pretending that pharmaceuticals are the answer to health.
So basically, you're saying that there is a lot of unknown unknowns that is happening with the drugs use and the supplement use that we don't know yet. So let's stick to what it worked for millions of years for us to the
Well, and also we're not going to know because the people that are selling the pills and potions are not doing the research to find out any negatives. And when they are, it's often suppressed. So there's a strong bias to design studies in such a way that it promotes the outcome that you're looking for, because that's how people make their money. Sometimes it's so egregiously awful that it becomes obvious, and then they just switch to a new drug and tell you, oh yeah, the old drugs are terrible, but the new drugs are great. And they're doing that right now with weight loss drugs and other things. So they rush them out there. Everybody gets on board because it's a chance to, lose weight without actually changing your diet or whatever. And then eventually the truth comes out, and then we shift to a new round of pills, potions, powders, and treatments.
Beautiful. But coming back to the cancer treatment, so I think it's when you don't eat, it makes sense that so you're going a lot of stuff in your body. A lot of cells they will die, and you're going to create new ones, and you're going to have your body working a lot more efficiently. So it makes sense in my brain that it can be a great way to treat cancer, to make tumors smaller or our body more effective to fight them. So
what's even better though than treating cancer is preventing cancer. The only cure for cancer is prevention. And it's diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting that are going to be helpful in making the body changes so you don't get the cancer to begin with. And once you got it, doesn't mean you can't try to manage it with diet, sleep, exercise, and fasting. But the real cure is prevention. And that's what we need to try. But the problem is people often aren't motivated until they're driven by pain, debility, and fear of death. What we're trying to do is encourage people to be motivated for the desire for health, rather than only be motivated by the desire to eliminate the pain and debility associated with disease.
It's very beautiful. And this is what you are doing. I was talking with one expert as well of the industry, and he was saying we need to spend more budget in prevention than of the diseases in comparison to treatment of the disease.
But the money is treating disease. That's where the money is made. That's who's selling the pills and potions that makes the money. How do you make money? Encouraging people to adopt a healthy diet and eat well. It's not as easy as it is to make money the other way. And so there's a whole industry out there sucking people's economics resources dry for treating them once they're already sick. So now you have to decide, how do you motivate industry or government to encourage people? And the other problem is people are addicts. They're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain that comes from eating the chemicals that are put in their food that make them fat, sick, and miserable. And those chemicals are salt, oil, and sugar. So you have to get people to be willing to adopt a whole plant food, SOS-free diet. That's difficult because it's like telling an alcoholic, hey, you're an alcoholic. Your life sucks because you drink. And the alcoholic doesn't go, oh, it's the alcohol. I had no idea. Thank you. I won't drink anymore. They tell you to mind your own effing business because they're an addict. And they don't want to hear about having to change their addictions. And so you're going to have great resistance from people if you suggest that they make radical diet and lifestyle changes. And meanwhile, the industry's out there telling them, oh yeah, eat all those highly processed foods. Don't worry, we'll give you a pill or a potion.
I'm curious to hear, did you have any special, beautiful stories with the people that you don't need to refer names or something, but with the people that they came to your clinic that they took?
Well, we've published dozens of case reports and studies. Just go to our website at fasting.org. So you'll see case after case after case of well-documented, published in peer-reviewed journals, outcome data from people that make these radical diet and lifestyle changes, just like you've talked about. Whether it's overcoming their asthma, their eczema, their psoriasis, their rheumatoid arthritis, sustained weight loss. So we've got data now that show that 2/3 of the patients in the study, after a year, were able to sustain not only their weight loss, but their normal blood pressure and their hypertensive free state. So it is possible not only to get well, but to stay well. And again, if you go and look at our research, I think it'll be much more compelling than individual isolated anecdotal stories. When we did hypertension, we took 174 patients in a row 174 consecutive patients, 174 people achieve pressure low enough to eliminate the need for the medication. And as you know, high blood pressure medications have serious side effects, chronic cough, fatigue, impotence, and death. And so the fact is that it's basically universal. If you have essential hypertension and you're willing to do these changes with fasting, you're going to be able to likely normalize your blood pressure. And if you're willing to adopt the diet, you can sustain those indefinitely. It's true with type 2 diabetes. It's true with autoimmune disease. It's true with lymphoma. There's a wide variety of conditions that respond. And interestingly enough, those conditions are all caused or made worse by dietary excess. So it's not surprising that fasting would be helpful, because fasting undoes the consequences of dietary excess.
So I'm curious, because you talked about the pharma business, that they are is making so much money on this, and you have a business trying to solve this problem. And this is the organization that you are referring, right?
Well, yeah, the TrueNorth Health Foundation, though, keep in mind, is a 501c3 nonprofit research foundation disguised as a clinic. So yes, we run a clinic that specializes in medically supervised water-only fasting. So we have 1,200 people a year that come through this facility and stay with us for anywhere from 5 days to 2 months to go through and do this process. We also have a dozen clinicians that provide through our telemedicine practice. If you go to our website at healthpromoting.com, we have a telemedicine practice where you can work with a doctor anywhere in the world. And these doctors are unicorns because they're not idiots, and they're experienced in fasting, and they can talk to you about these diet changes. And these are medical doctors, chiropractors, naturopaths, psychologists that are experienced in using this protocol. So it's great now because of the technology and Zoom and all this stuff. You can have access to doctors affordably that can really coach and guide you through these processes. So, it is getting a lot better. There's a lot more educational materials. We have a whole set of videos that are freely available on Roku. If you sign up through our website for TrueNorth Health Roku, you can download the videos for free. We live stream our lectures from the center, also freely available through the website. So people can avail themselves of these information. And I also offer a free phone consultation. If you are interested in talking to me about would fasting be appropriate for you or that kind of thing, all you have to do is go to healthpromoting.com, complete the registration forms, and then I will talk to you on the phone without cost to at least briefly discuss how relevant this might be, refer you to an appropriate doctor, try to get you hooked up with a place near you that might be able to help you achieve and maintain optimum health. And particularly when it comes to fasting, we have doctors that are experts in this.
So the goal of this organization is to make research and also profit to grow and become bigger, right? Or
I don't know about grow and become bigger. One of the things we do is we have an internship residency training program. So we train doctors to do fasting supervision. We charge nothing for this. We provide room, board, and training. The doctors come, they go through the training process, then they go out and hopefully open up facilities to do that. So part of the mission of the foundation is research. So we're doing original research on fasting, figure out how to do it better. We're training doctors to do it, and we're doing public education. That's why we have our website, fasting.org, where we do podcasts like this. So our foundation sponsors all of that for the purpose of doing public education. So my wife says the entire operation is just to try to prove I'm right and everybody else is wrong. So she might be right. But we believe that health results from healthful living, and we're determined to try to prove that with research, public education, and physician training.
So you are the creator of all this foundation. The thing, this is you started everything.
Well, we have,
right?
yeah. My wife and I started this 40 years ago, so we've been doing this since 1984. But the TrueNorth Health Center has 72 clinicians and employees. We have, a broad staff, and it's a large facility now that is able to handle, a diverse amount of issues. We have a new book that'll be coming out next year. It's called "Can Fasting Save Your Life?" which is fantastic summary and a collaboration of all of the research that we've done. In fact, we're just finishing the editing right now on the book. We've got a publisher on June 30th. It goes to the publisher. So we're very excited that next year we'll have this book out that I think people will really enjoy.
Okay, and I want to for last, I want to ask you, what is your motivation of doing all these things, and why you created all this stuff?
Originally,
and you put so much work, so much to create a business, have employees, all this stuff is not easy. And like doing all this podcast, trying to get the message out, and it seems that profit is not your driving force. So why are you doing this stuff?
Originally, my friend Doug Lyle and I grew up 4th grade, and I was very frustrated because we played basketball, but he always beat me. And I wanted to beat him. And so I read books, and I finally found a book on health by Herbert Shelby that said health was a result of healthful living. If you ate well and you use fasting, you could get healthier. And I thought, if I get healthier, I'll have an edge, and I'll beat him. And I adopted all this. The problem is it didn't work because he adopted the same diet. And to this day, I'm 65 years old now. He still beats me every time we play. I don't know what I'm going to do. So it totally failed, but it got me interested in this. And then I was further motivated. My uncle, who was a medical doctor, and when I said I wanted to go into do this field, he said, no, not to go into this field. Nobody in our family would do this kind of alternative medicine. He said, nobody would go to see that type of doctor, let alone become that kind of doctor. He said, better I should be a communist spy than to do that type of work. And so he was so upset. He was screaming and yelling. This is when I was 16. My father took me aside. He was a serious man, and he was a school teacher. He said, son, I don't know anything about alternative medicine, but anything that makes him that angry and mad, it can't be bad. So you stick to your guns. Good luck to you. I pursued it. And now, here it is 40 years later, and we're finally getting some published papers that we feel satisfied with. We've got the book coming out. So it's starting to feel like now the problem is still Dr. Lau beats me in basketball every time we play. So I still haven't achieved my goal. But eventually, I hope maybe he'll age out just a little quicker or something. Maybe when we're in our 80s, I'll finally be able to beat him. I don't know. That's what I keep holding out for.
So for 40 years of work, and if I give you, let's say now $1 trillion, how you are going to distribute it to have more impact to get this message out that you are talking passionately about?
Well, I think what we would do is we would expand our public education outreach. Right now we're trying to develop some viral videos and things that might have an impact on younger people. We'd like to expand the training programs, make it more available to physicians so that they understand that when we have interns and residents come through, the most common thing they say is, wow, I've never seen anybody get well before.
You need to have a person filming TikToks all the time there.
Absolutely. when you treat somebody with high blood pressure or diabetes, you tell them, if you're a physician, you tell them, listen, you have to be on these drugs for the rest of your life because you'll never get well. If you do what I say, we promise you'll be sick forever. And, in our experience, these people can get well and get off medications. Doctors don't know that. So we need to expand our outreach to physicians. That's why we've written the book. That's why we got and do, the work that we're doing is trying to get that message out. But there's better ways to do it if you have resources. Also, we'd like to be able to, right now, doctors have trouble coming, even though we pay for them to train and we provide room and board. They have trouble. They have huge student loans. They have other things. We'd like to be able to offer them stipends, so that they could do it. Because we are a nonprofit foundation, we still have to charge money for people staying with us, try to keep those rates very low. Our rates are fractional compared to any other place in the country. In fact, probably the world, in terms of offering medically supervised inpatient care. Well, less than $200 a day includes everything. So in order to do that, though, you have to have resources. If we had endowment funding, we could do it where not every, you could have people that couldn't afford to pay. We could enroll more people in studies. So economics are great. And we've been very fortunate because we've had very generous benefactors that have supported our foundation. That's how we're able to do a lot of the work that we're doing. But yeah, it's always a limiting factor. Research particularly is very expensive, and we don't get the exogenous research grants that other facilities do that are sponsored by drug companies and stuff. So it's all financed by our patients that are going through the facility. I will say, though, we did just get our first grant for some money to look at proteomics and some other biochemical markers associated with one of the universities we're affiliated with now. And we've also got papers coming out. We have colleagues at the Mayo Clinic, Texas A&M, a new paper coming out this week associated with Washington University where we collected the data. They've processed this study. So it's getting a little bit better as we figure out how to work within the the scientific community and get our papers published.
So it's so beautiful to see the light in your face that after 40 years you get some recognition from the scientific community and you can do some work in.
Yeah, we've gone from being criminal quacks to kind of cutting edge researchers. So things are getting a little bit easier than it might have been in the past.
It's so beautiful for me to see that one person with determination and work for a lot of years can do stuff in this world if they stick to the same topic and grow. So it was an inspiring conversation. It was your podcast was a fuel of me to continue doing the 30-day thing. So whatever you did on the podcast, I watched probably 10-15 of them, and I really understood every need and grit of it for me to do it myself. So your work has an impact, and I'm grateful that you took the time to talk with me together. I love you. Go down in the description, guys. I will put the website, I will put the book, I will put anything that we talked about in the thing, and try them. The organization, try fasting, will be a great challenge. And thank
you for getting the word out about fasting.
Okay, thank you for watching, guys. Bye bye.